Well, Russian President Vladimir Putin has fundamentally altered the rules of nuclear engagement. This dramatic shift in military doctrine coming on the 1,000th day of the Ukraine conflict represents a stark escalation in international tensions and a direct response to Washington's decision to allow Ukrainian strikes inside Russia.
The stakes are rising. The threat of nuclear conflict looms larger. Vladimir Putin fine-tunes Russia's nuclear doctrine. The West is put on notice. Russia's new doctrine expands nuclear response scenarios beyond traditional boundaries. Moscow says that it is being forced to do so due to hostile actions from the West. A large-scale conventional attack, drone strikes, or threats to Russian sovereignty could now trigger a nuclear response. More ominously, an attack by any member of a Western coalition would be considered aggression from the entire group. The implications are profound. Russia has been conducting large-scale nuclear drills. One of them were conducted immediately after Paris said it is open to deploying French boots on the Ukrainian battlefield. This time, Putin has lowered the nuclear threshold, a day after the Biden administration allowed Ukraine to fire American missiles on Russian territory. Another big red line has been breached. The Kremlin's message is clear. Retaliation is not just possible, it's inevitable. Moscow's move aligns with broader preparations, including mass production of bomb shelters designed to withstand radiation, shock waves, and fire. These mobile Cub-M shelters deployed across Russia's permafrost regions highlight a defensive pivot amid growing global tensions. Satellite imagery also reveals expanded facilities for solid fuel missile production across Russia, signaling an increase in its missile arsenal. The missile sites are in the Altai Republic in Siberia, Rostov in southern Russia, outside Moscow and St. Petersburg, and in Perm in western Russia. The revision to the rules guiding the firing of weapons of mass destruction aim to bolster the credibility of Russian threats as the conflict with Ukraine grinds on with no end in sight. Together, Russia and the US control nearly 90% of the world's nuclear weapons, underscoring the high stakes of any miscalculation. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Gabriel Noronha is a former special advisor for Iran at the U.S. State Department under Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Executive Director of Polaris National Security. Mr. Noronha is now joining us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much for your time and welcome, Mr. Noronha. Let's get right to it. What direction, in your view, has the war taken now following Ukraine's move and Russia's response after the ATACMS were fired towards it?
Well, thank you for having me, and hello to all your viewers. This war is at a turning point right now. Both sides are trying to increase their leverage for the negotiations that are expected to take place once President Trump gets into office 2 months from now. And the other thing we've seen now is the Biden administration is finally freed from its own nervousness about its own election, and so is willing to do a bit more to give Ukraine leverage. I think the other thing that we're missing here is the introduction of North Korean troops here. Now it is two nations fighting Ukraine on Ukrainian territory. And so the idea that the United States should simply stand by and ignore that as North Korean troops and now Iranian weapons are fighting in is a little naive. And so I think what we're going to see is both sides have to kind of fight to the table. They have to increase tensions and increase leverage so that both sides want to have a resolution and ultimately get to a ceasefire in the coming months.
Mr. Noronha, for days now, critics have been pleading with President Putin to hold off reacting or deploying the nukes, but the Russian president seems to have been provoked by Ukraine's move. What card could Putin pull at this point, and how detrimental would Russia's response be?
Well, it's important to know that the winds blow from west to east. So even if President Putin decided to try to use a nuclear weapon on Ukraine, it would end up killing large amounts of Russian citizens as well. It would pollute Russian air. It would pollute Russian water. And so I think that some of these threats are a little overblown. I think doing so would actually be a massive, massive, massive red line for the international community. It would change this war permanently. It would force China to have to draw some distance between itself and Russia. And so this would be a move of utter desperation by Putin to use a nuclear weapon. I don't think the threats to use a nuclear weapon against the United States are remotely serious because, again, the United States has the ability to completely obliterate Russia in response.
Mr. Noronha, if this war escalates, because it now looks like it has, wouldn't it be hard for Trump to pacify, having in mind that his inauguration is 2 months away?
Well, I think both the American public wants to see an end to this war. The Ukrainian public wants an end to this war. The Russian public wants an end to the war. The question is just in the details. Yes, a nuclear weapon would, however, make any peace very difficult, if not impossible, if Russia does actually use nuclear weapons. And so that's actually a major impediment to what President Trump might do. But again, there are 2 months now between when he takes office. And so there's a lot of things that can happen in this war to disrupt peace negotiations. Those peace negotiations probably won't happen overnight. It's going to take some time. The Ukrainian red lines of what they're willing to give are still quite substantial. And so a resolution to conflict is not guaranteed, even when President Trump comes in and is willing to do these things. One thing Trump has said, though, is that if Russia declines to make an agreement to peace, he will then give Ukraine all the weapons that it needs to actually win this war. And so there's consequences for Putin for refusing a peace deal as well.
All right, I've been talking to the Executive Director of Polaris National Security, Mr. Gabriel Noronha. Thank you very much for your time and for talking to us today.
Thank you for having me.